All right, friends, most of the businesses that we have talked about in the course of the semester have been what might be called legitimate enterprises. That means that although some of them are badly behaved, others are well behaved, all of them are legitimate enterprises. They offer a product. That product or resource or service is offered at a particular price. The business sells that to customers, pockets the profits. If it struggles, they cut certain aspects of the business to become more efficient so that they can once again make a profit. And then the business continues as a going concern. Okay, those are legitimate enterprises. Some of them are badly behaved. We talked about Wells Fargo last time, badly behaved, at least some of the employees there were badly behaved, but still a very legitimate enterprise. Today we're going to talk about illegitimate enterprises. That is, we're going to talk about business models that are actually unsustainable. They cannot continue as going concerns. They are unsustainable because structurally they are illegitimate. Okay, and I have two business models in mind in particular. These are the pyramid scheme and the Ponzi scheme. Okay, so first off, the pyramid scheme. And then we'll cover Ponzi schemes momentarily. Okay, the pyramid scheme is a classic illegitimate enterprise. And it's become so famous, so well known, that there are entire courses in college that are devoted to this at some schools. Okay, but it's structurally relatively simple. It is a hierarchical business enterprise where some persons, the first people in the enterprise, recruit others, who then go on to recruit still others. Okay, and there are two ways that money is made in this hierarchy. Okay, one way is through, of course, direct sales. And this is legitimate. These are sales that go to people outside of the hierarchy. Okay, the second way that money is made through this, in this model, is through recruitment. So maybe the model is structured so that this person here gets 50% of this person's profits. And then another 25%, these numbers are probably a little bit high, but still, you get the point. Another 25% of this second generation, and still another 12.5% of the third generation, and so forth. Okay, and so money is made by each individual through the sales that he or she makes, and then also through the sales that children and grandchildren in the hierarchy make. Okay, now some of these enterprises are definitely legitimate. Okay, and I want to stress that. There are hierarchical business models that are quite legitimate. One example of a hierarchical business model that's been around for a long time and is a respected, legitimate company is the well-known cosmetics company for older women, Mary Kay Cosmetics. Okay, younger women don't really use these cosmetics, but these are sold in house parties and door-to-door, friend-to-friend, mostly through word of mouth. And there are incentives in this well-known company. If you're a good Mary Kay saleswoman, you can get, sometimes you see these on the road, the pink Cadillac, right? The pink Mary Kay Cadillac. Okay, this is a legitimate company, and it's legitimate because, this is the key point, what makes a company like this legitimate as opposed to others that are not. More than 50% of the product leaves the hierarchy. Okay, that's just a rule of thumb number, but well more than 50% of the product leaves the hierarchy for Mary Kay. Okay, and generations of women, she may be still alive. I don't know. She may have passed. I'm not sure. Generations of women have sold cosmetics in this company. It's a Dallas-based enterprise originally, and have successfully made themselves into, some of them, low-level millionaires as a result of their hard work. Okay, but this enterprise goes wrong. It becomes a pyramid scheme when a certain feature of the pyramid scheme becomes the case. Okay, and that is if less than 50% of product leaves the hierarchy, then it becomes a predatory model. Okay, what do I mean by predatory model? Well, let me give you an illustration of this using a company that I don't like at all. Okay, Herbalife. Has anyone ever sold for Herbalife, or do you know friends or family who have sold for Herbalife? Show of hands. Anna? You yourself or others? Others? Okay. Herbalife is a company that is in the business of selling nutritional supplements, shakes, various different kinds of nutrition-based foodstuffs. Okay, they have well-known spokespersons. I believe Cristiano Ronaldo is their international spokesperson. Okay, and Herbalife is a predatory business model. The reason why it's predatory is because most of the product is actually consumed within the hierarchy. It doesn't actually leave the hierarchy. Okay, most of the product is actually consumed by the people who are recruited into the hierarchy. Okay, Herbalife one day will collapse. The reason why it one day will collapse is because Herbalife's business model only works if people can continually cycle through at these lower levels. They don't stay for very long because they find out that they actually can't move product. Most of them can't move product. Okay, and so they leave, but others are cycled in. And the way the cycling works is various sales rallies, hype rallies are used. Various forms of get-rich-quick literature are used. Okay, often there are success stories that are listed where people within 5 years were able to accumulate enough money to retire, that sort of thing. Okay, and they have to use this constant pressure to recruit others to come into the pyramid, since people are constantly leaving the pyramid, finding that they actually cannot sell the product. The product is often too expensive. There's not enough demand for it. There are other options that people can turn to for nutritional supplements, shakes, and the like. Okay, and in fact, Herbalife is incredibly predatory if you look at who actually makes the income. This is an amazing statistic. Okay, the top 1% in the hierarchy, because of the breakdown of these numbers where they make money on the basis of what other people make, the top 1% actually makes a huge percentage of the income. Does anyone want to take a guess? Out of 100%, what do you think the top 1% makes of all the income that is made at Herbalife? More than 80. 95? More than 95. 99? It's 99. It is 99%. Yeah. So the top 1% makes 99% of the profits at Herbalife. And like everybody else is losing money in the pyramid. Okay, now they're not losing a lot of money. They're losing like 1,000 here or 1,000 there because they buy the entry-level shakes package or whatever to sell to their neighbors and then find that they can't sell it and move on, have to consume it themselves or whatever. Okay, but they are losing money, and the top 1% is predatory upon the rest. So I'm not sure about these guys, but I do know that it's structured so that it's incredibly hierarchically structured, so that if you happens to be one of the first people in the Herbalife pyramid, it's a great business model, a perpetual revenue machine for you. But if you happen to be one of everybody else, it doesn't work at all. Herbalife is predatory, especially on relational networks, and this is true of all pyramid schemes. Okay, much of this depends on direct sales, and that requires relational trust. So companies like this are especially predatory on networks of relational trust. An example might be churches, okay, or community organizations, families. Okay, Herbalife is especially widespread in our nation's Latino community. The Latino community has large families, very trusting relational networks. I think that's a great thing, but it is also something that has made many susceptible to the Herbalife predatory pitch, right? If grandma at Christmas says, you know, I've got a great new business idea for the family, let's all join in. No one wants to upset grandma. Everyone's like relationally connected, and so they all feel obligated to join in. It's something like that, maybe. Okay, Herbalife is, of course, not the only company that is illegitimate like this. There are lots of illegitimate pyramid schemes. Primerica comes to mind. Sometimes it'll be kitchenwares. I think Cutco is borderline illegitimate. I'm not sure if they actually are. Skincare, yeah, a lot of skincare. Yeah, I believe New Skin is actually illegitimate. They're a pyramid scheme. Yeah, has anybody been recruited? Have you ever gotten a pitch for these kinds of businesses? Like somebody, a couple of us maybe share our experiences.
I've had a couple people pitch to me and ask me like, hey, you want to buy this, and then you want to become one of the people that sells it, and then because they would
Sure.
benefit them. I'm like, why would I want to sell like makeup and skincare? And they're like, well, it'll help your acne and all these things. And I'm like, I already have something like that. They're like, yeah, but this is better. And then
Right.
you can sell it, and you'll get it for free, and like, you'll get all these benefits. And all
Right.
this stuff. I'm like, it sounded too fishy for me. I'm like, oh.
You know, and that's a great model that Matthew shares, right? So if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. That's the best rule of thumb when encountering pitches like this. If it sounds too good to be true, right? Retirement within 5 years. Look, nobody retires within 5 years except Mark Zuckerberg, right? If you invent Facebook at age 20, maybe at age 25 you could retire. But like everybody else, retirement in 5 years is too good to be true. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Another couple of us, share your experiences. Has anybody gotten a pitch from a questionable enterprise that made you suspicious like this?
I've got them from everyone. America, ACN,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they all approach you with the least amount of information up front.
Yeah.
And then they give you all of the great success stories and how you're going to become it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but you know, if you've got good, like a sort of a healthy consumer cynicism, I suppose, and you know this sort of thing when you see it, it can be resisted, of course. But I have to say, actually, college students are often very vulnerable, especially when they don't know what they're going to do after school. We have a lot of these kinds of companies that recruit on our campus. I know Primerica has recruited here at HBU, and there are others as well. And it's because, you know, you don't know what you're going to do after school, and here's an opportunity to make promised wealth and that sort of thing. Okay, so just be aware of this. One last word on this. Why don't these companies get shut down? Well, some of them do. Some of them do get shut down. But this is, I suppose, a cynical comment to make, but some of them don't, most of them don't, and they probably do not because of their political lobbying donations. Okay, so Herbalife, for instance, has long given deep monies to various politicians to enable them to continue as a going concern and not be shut down by the government as a predatory enterprise. Matthew.
Would you know the company, the solar companies they're saying, hey, you can switch to solar energy for zero down and all of this and completely change where you go all solar, and they're saying like, hey, if you switch to solar, the windmills in West Texas and all the solar panels, that energy will come and feed your home, even though they have no way to guarantee that the energy that gets from those windmills and all that gets directly to your home. There's no way to prove that.
Yeah.
Is that a pyramid scheme?
So I would have to look at the particular business doing this and also the literature. And like Diana said, often they give very little information out at the beginning other than, the golden riches that could be coming your way if you get involved. The further in you go, the more suspicious it comes, and sometimes the more cult-like it becomes. But I have not heard of widespread pyramid schemes in the solar business like is prominent in cosmetics or in food or some kitchenwares and things like that. That doesn't mean it might not be occurring. Often, whenever there's some new exciting industry, a whole bunch of shysters all rush toward it because there's a lot of hype surrounding that industry. I was reading this article about 19th century American capitalism, and the big thing back then was railroads. And if you wanted to invest in railroads, you could make it rich real quick was the big hype at the time. And so all these shysters got involved and promised these incredible railroad investment packages for vulnerable Americans. And yes, it was a legitimate industry that was growing rapidly and was the future, but that kind of thing in American capitalism seems to attract a whole bunch of deceivers who target vulnerable people to either be customers or to invest. And I think the same thing may be going on these days in clean energy, okay? That might be solar, or it might be, I think that there are also a lot of EV firms that are illegitimate. But at the very least, there's a lot of fraud going on. We're in a golden age of fraud going right now. And I think a lot of that might be surrounding clean energy. Because clean energy is the future. Yes, it is, without a doubt. But that sort of hype tends to attract a bunch of people trying to make it rich off of other people's vulnerability. And I think that could very well be happening in the solar industry. I'm not sure. Rebecca.
If you were to ignore the political lobbying indications, and let's close down, shut down Herbalife, what legal basis will we have? Like what law have they broken?
We have laws against pyramid schemes.
Okay.
Yes, there are laws against them. This continues as a going concern because they pay off politicians who protect them from being targeted by those laws. We have laws against pyramid schemes because there have been numerous times in the past when such schemes have collapsed enormously and have caused an incredible loss of wealth. Herbalife continues because they keep going around the world finding more people. They will eventually collapse because they're going to run out of people. But my wife and I were in South America just a couple of years ago. She grew up as a missionary kid in Bolivia, and I saw Herbalife stuff all over Bolivia, just everywhere in Bolivia, especially in the impoverished urban areas. And I was just very grieved to see all of the Herbalife, the involvement in urban Bolivia, because these people quite clearly are hard workers and they wanted to make it out of the poverty. And here was this predatory company channeling their energies into something that would just benefit the people at the top of the company and not everybody else. So they continue to go around the world finding other people. There are laws against pyramid schemes. There are also laws against a second kind of business model that's related to pyramid schemes. It's kind of joined at the hip. It has a lot of features of pyramid schemes, but it's also different in certain ways. And that second kind of business model is the Ponzi scheme. Ponzi schemes come from a dude, they're named after a dude named Charles Ponzi from the early 20th century. He got started with a special scheme involving stamps, okay? And all you had to do was give him your money, and he would invest it in stamp collections. And after a short period of time, your money would appreciate substantially. Let me talk about how a Ponzi scheme works, okay? So let us imagine that I'm a Ponzi schemer. Okay, and Riley comes to me, and I say to Riley, recognizing that she's vulnerable to this sort of thing, I say, 5 will get you 10. If you give me your gold bars, I will give you a solid return after a year's time. Okay, Riley says, okay, and does it, right? And then Elijah comes to me next, and I say to him, give me your gold bars, and I will give you a solid return after a year's time. Elijah says, okay, and does it. And then let me see, who's going to get totally hosed by it? Do I have a volunteer? Diego's going to be my volunteer. All right. Diego comes last, and the person who comes last always gets completely hosed by the Ponzi scheme, okay? Now, what happens in a Ponzi scheme is the schemer takes the gold bars, the money or whatever, from later participants and gives it to the earlier participants as a form of return. Okay, so from here to here and from there to there. Not everybody loses in a Ponzi scheme. If you happen to be one of the first, you can actually make off quite well. But if you happen to be one of the last, you often lose everything. Okay, the Ponzi schemer skims off the top and lives the high life by taking bits from these people. But no money is actually invested. No legitimate enterprise ever takes place. The most famous Ponzi schemer of all time, without a doubt, is Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff made off with about $65 billion. It's a lot of money. Okay, and Bernie Madoff is famous because his Ponzi scheme lasted for so long. Most Ponzi schemes collapse after a year or two. They just aren't sustainable. You can't keep finding people. But Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme lasted for 25 years. And it finally collapsed in 2008 when the Great Recession hit. Now, the way recessions work and bear markets in the stock market is people, they get scared and they pull their money. Ponzi schemer can't have this. Right? So if people start pulling their money all at once, it's a run on the Ponzi schemer, and he can't keep filling up their accounts with monies from later people. Okay, the Ponzi schemer only can keep the scheme going if he still has people who trust in him. And if he can continue to, as occasionally, as they sometimes do, people pull their money out, continue to pay them off as they pull their money out. Okay, Bernie Madoff was the ultimate Ponzi schemer because he had people's trust. He was at one point, for 3 years, the chairman of the NASDAQ. He was the ultimate insider. And people believed that somebody who was that connected and that much of an insider surely couldn't be wrong and couldn't be a schemer. And nobody even thought that this could be the case. Until one day, apparently in 2008, he confessed at his family dinner table as the government was closing in to his family, confessed to his family that he was a fraud and had been for 25 years. This didn't go over well. It's a very sad story. One of his sons committed suicide. Another had a heart attack and I believe died. Okay, it's a sad story. Bernie Madoff is in jail and will be for the rest of his life. Okay, Madoff duped a lot of high-ranking people in this country. A bunch of Hollywood's upper crust got duped. Steven Spielberg lost a lot of money. George Lucas, Kevin Bacon, other actors and actresses. The nation's Jewish community lost a lot of money. Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize winner, lost his life savings. Others, the owners of big major sports teams lost money. The owner of the New York Mets lost a fortune. Okay, and ultimately only about $5 billion of this was recovered. Okay, only approximately $5 billion of the $65 billion that was lost in the Ponzi scheme was recovered. The rest of it had vanished through Madoff's spending and through various other schemes that have been going on. Okay, now I have a question for you guys. Bernie Madoff was a very sophisticated man, a very sophisticated money manager. He had a long track record. He had been chairman of the NASDAQ. if he had come to you and made you a pitch to be your money manager, okay, he was like this Manhattan connections, upper level Washington connections and everything, would you have been able to tell that he was a fraud? I probably wouldn't have. A good Ponzi schemer makes sure that it's not easy to tell that he's a fraud. Okay, a bad Ponzi schemer is the Nigerian prince who sends you the email in Gmail, right, asking for money and telling you that you can get 50% appreciation within a week. That's a bad Ponzi schemer. Good Ponzi schemer is subtle. So let me ask you guys, what tests or what criteria can you appeal to in order to identify a legitimate money manager and separate such a person from an illegitimate one? How could you tell potentially that someone like Bernie Madoff's a fraud?
You were saying that they don't actually invest anything, right?
That's right.
So you can have to see where your money is being invested. Like, see, like, hey, I want to see where you've invested my money.
Sure. And Madoff had records where he could show you where your money had been invested. Yeah. They were lies, just made up the records, yeah. He had some henchmen who helped him. Just keep it under your bed. Oh my goodness, I've been reading about how the Federal Reserve is looking into a digital currency, a national digital currency. You guys all know how big Bitcoin is getting, of course, right? So the government doesn't like Bitcoin. In fact, it's an existential struggle right now. The government hates Bitcoin. And there's all this toxic rhetoric coming out of the Treasury Department about how Bitcoin is an evil thing. The government doesn't like Bitcoin because Bitcoin is not controlled by the government, right? It's an uncontrollable money supply. That's the whole idea, is this libertarian ideal of money that is not fiat currency controlled by any centralized authority. And so there's this existential struggle going on right now between the government and the practitioners of Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's going to lose, but it's still too early to tell. So I may be wrong. We may be a few years out from it, but I really don't know that Bitcoin can win this struggle. We shall see. But anyway, so all that's to say that, I guess I was talking about digital currency. All that's to say that there are actually two ways you can tell that a Ponzi schemer is a schemer. Okay, the first way is consistent returns. Remember I said the Ponzi schemer, what he can't have is everybody pulling their money at once. Okay, the S&P 500 over the last 100 years or so has returned about 9 to 10% a year. But it's not 9 to 10% every year. It fluctuates. Some years it's 21%. Some years it's minus 3%. And all the way in between. The Ponzi schemer cannot have this. Okay, the Ponzi schemer cannot risk these minus 3% years. Because what happens in a situation like that is people pull their money looking for some other place to put their money where they'll get a better return. And the Ponzi schemer cannot risk that. So the Ponzi schemer has to have consistent returns. Now this leads us to the second notifying feature, above average returns. Consistent above average returns are the keys. Bernie Madoff was successful because he offered his clients about 14% per year. And he did this every year, year in, year out, 14% returns. That's better than average. Now, some people are better than average, without a doubt. Some people are, but the great majority are average. And Madoff never had down years, ever. And honestly, if his customers had been a bit smarter financially, I think they wouldn't have been prey to this. Because eventually, if somebody never has a down year, after 25 years, that's probably a sign that it's either Warren Buffett, and some people are, or it's Bernie Madoff, which is more likely. Because there aren't very many Warren Buffetts. Okay, questions or comments about Ponzi schemes? Ponzi schemes always collapse in the end because you run out of people, just like pyramid schemes. Ponzi schemes collapse in the end because eventually you can't find another sucker.
Warren Buffett had both of these and was in the same.
Oh, no. Warren Buffett was and is perhaps the best investor of all time. Warren Buffett has had years of above average returns, like way above average. So I'm just saying, either your money manager is Warren Buffett and he's really good, or he's faking it, and therefore is Bernie Madoff. That's all I'm saying, yeah. Okay? Any questions or observations about these things? These are two illegitimate business models. We're going to take a quick break. Then when we come back, we're going to do some federal regulations. Okay, so let's go ahead and go on break for 2 or 3 minutes. And then we'll look at a PowerPoint with our Sarbanes-Oxley federal regulations, which will be on the test this week.